In the year 2040, due to excessive population growth, Earth's resources have become scarce. To ensure the continuation of humanity's future, the United Nations issued a resolution requiring all countries to reduce their populations by 5% each year. In order to maintain its own racial superiority, the US government adopted a policy of survival of the fittest to preserve strong genes and implemented a reduction plan through student examinations. Those with lower scores would be eliminated, but Luna, who had outstanding grades, was still placed on the reduction list. In order to find her real scores and prove her innocence, she wanted to team up with Blake, who had managed to break the reduction plan. After facing life and death situations together, the two finally uncovered the truth. They discovered that the tampering of grades was not an isolated incident. Beneath the seemingly fair reduction exam, corruption was rampant. The two of them exposed the evidence of grade manipulation, and amid the ensuing public outcry, Luna finally obtained the fairness she had always dreamed of. However, Blake, who had deliberately failed, was now facing the reduction exam. A week later, at Blake's funeral, Luna, dressed in black, sat behind Old D, looking at the person in front of her who had altered the grades. The governor, who stirs up trouble and sows discord, was filled with mixed emotions. His political maneuvers sent chills down Luna's spine. In order to quell the political uproar, he didn't hesitate to sacrifice his own child. What's more, he had once framed her as a terrorist. As Luna, still mired in controversy, left the funeral, the media like shark smelling blood swarmed to her. Now the scandal of grade falsification continues to ferment. Luna, as the person at the centre of it all, became the most sought after interviewee. However, she still hadn't recovered from Blake's passing and only responded perfunctorily before leaving the crowd. Yet, an investigator soon came to her asking about the grade switching incident. Luna knew there were too many complications involved in the exam scandal just in the past few days. Countless troubles had come knocking at her door, and even her own doorstep had turned into a gathering place for reporters. She had now become a public figure, so for safety reasons, she didn't reveal too much to the other party. But before the woman left, she handed Luna a business card indicating that Luna could contact her if needed. As soon as the woman left, there was another knock at the door. The visitor introduced himself as Old D's assistant Jack wanted to invite Luna for a chat. Looking at the handsome and spirited Jack, Luna couldn't help but feel a bit dazed, but she was well aware that back then, Old D had stirred up trouble and slandered her as a terrorist. Although her name had finally been cleared, being invited at this moment might be a sign of an impending trap. However, since Old D extended the invitation in Blake's name, Luna couldn't refuse. In the spacious and tidy conference room, seeing the governor in a suit standing before her, Luna couldn't help but sit up straight. Even though he wore a broad smile and spoke kindly, she still didn't dare to let her guard down for a moment. Looking at Old D's outstretched hand, Luna cut straight to the point and brought up how he had once slandered her. But Old D didn't get angry. Instead, he sincerely explained to Luna that he had simply been deceived by his subordinates. Now that Mason, who had tricked him, had also been punished, he had invited Luna here just to apologize for the misunderstanding caused by his poor management. As compensation, he could offer Luna a well-paid job so that she could better provide for her family. But Luna could hear the subtext in Old D's word sheet wanted to use her to whitewash the elimination program. Luna had long grown disgusted with this insane exam, and she immediately rejected Old D's proposal. However, just as Luna was about to take Connie and the other person away, Georgina appeared in front of them. Though her words were gentle, every sentence revolved around Connie and the others' elimination exam. She hinted to Luna that if she didn't cooperate, she would tamper with the two's exams and put them on the elimination list. No matter how sweetly the other party spoke, Luna knew better than to bargain with a tiger for its skin. But Georgina said no more, simply arranging for Jack to escort Luna and the others back. In the car, Luna watched as Jack drove in the opposite direction and couldn't help but ask him about it. But Jack ignored Luna's question instead. He raised the partition and released a cloud of knockout gas. Luna immediately sensed something was wrong and hurriedly pounded on the window for help, but the white smoke around her grew thicker and thicker, and she soon felt dizzy and drifted off into a deep sleep, not knowing when she lost consciousness. When she woke up again, she found herself brought by Jack to an abandoned factory, and standing beside her was none other than Connie's teacher. Seeing Luna's confusion, Cole explained that he and the others were members of a resistance organization. They are dedicated to overthrowing the pruning exam and establishing a better pruning strategy. Now, their members have already infiltrated all parts of society, constantly helping students in danger escape from the United States. Hearing this, Luna couldn't help but interrupt Colshay, remembered the threat she had just received before leaving. She wanted to ask them to take Coney and the other person away, but Cole insisted that she accept the job offered by Old D, infiltrate the other side, and gather evidence for the organization to bring down the pruning plan. Hearing that she could help topple the pruning exam and also ensure Coney and the others' safety, Luna agreed without hesitation. But that very night, Karen knocked on Luna's door, bringing news that left her completely bewildered. Ever since she helped Luna expose the shady dealings behind the grade reduction, Karen had been invited to join a media outlet. Over the past few days, she had been investigating the whereabouts of those who had been pruned. But the more she investigated, the more confused she became. After Blake was pruned, from transport to burial, not a single person had actually seen Blake's body, which meant he might not be dead after all. This time, Karen sought out Luna because she wanted to confirm her suspicions. Together with her, Luna had heard that Blake might still be alive. Shocked, he couldn't understand how Karen planned to prove it. It wasn't until the two of them arrived at the cemetery that Luna instead took the lead, climbing over the gate and heading straight for Blake's burial site. Karen began to hesitate, but Luna pulled out a shovel and started digging with a clang. She knew that if Blake wasn't dead, it would prove there was still more to uncover behind little Jan's plan. In the silent cemetery, the sounds of insects and birds filled the air. The sound of the shovel digging into the earth was interrupted by a sudden thud, and the two exchanged glances. Now perhaps what was reburied in this coffin was not Blake, but a deeper engine behind the downsized plan. Without hesitation, Luna made a decisive move, prying open the coffin lid. Seeing the empty coffin, the two realised that an even deeper mystery was still brewing in the shadows. In a dimly lit room, the screen lit up, casting a soft glow on Blake's face. The corpses scattered haphazardly around also began to slowly awaken, realising they had not been eliminated. Overcome with joy, many burst into tears. But before Blake could even wonder why he had once again escaped death, the answer appeared in the video on the screen. This group of inspection personnel was deemed to still hold value for society, so they were spared and instead taken in by global corporations' incubator factories, long as they could demonstrate their worth through their work here. If they succeeded, they would be accepted back into society. Upon hearing this, everyone was overjoyed at having escaped death. Eager to prove their worth and return to society as soon as possible, everyone rushed impatiently toward their assigned rooms. But Blake, ever the rebel, touched the device implanted in his neck and asked what would happen if someone refused to comply with the assignments. He received no answer, but the surrounding guards all stepped forward in unison. Realizing that a wise man submits to circumstances, Blake made no further moves and pushed open the door to enter. In the video that played after entering, they were introduced to the factory. The way to prove their worth was to work on the assembly line for 14 hours a day and observe a curfew at the designated time. Those who performed exceptionally well at work would earn the right to return to society. At that moment, however, Blake stared intently at the screen, paying no attention to the video's narration because he had spotted a familiar figure. His lover, who'd been eliminated a year ago, was now sitting at the assembly line. This was unbelievable to Blake, who hurried into the factory to find Ellie and embraced her tightly. But curfew was approaching, so Ellie took Blake back to her dormitory. Overcome with emotion, the two spent a passionate night together. However, their actions were reported by a boy. Soon, a group led by Hector, with Blake at the forefront, confronted Blake and warned him to stay away from Ellie in the factory because now she belonged to them. Blake was new here, and seeing that the other side had the advantage in numbers, he didn't act rashly. But during mealtime, he witnessed Hector doing disgusting things to Ellie. Blake asked his companions about Hector's identity and learned that even in this factory, there was still a class hierarchy. Supervisors like Hector were chosen to manage the workers. They would catch anyone unwilling to work, lock them in an iron cage, beat them mercilessly, and then throw them back to their posts. This group of people usually acted lawlessly, but since they had the authority to call the guards, no one dared to provoke them. After Hector left, Blake looked at his distraught lover, wanting to ask her for an explanation, but Ellie, worried that Blake would get hurt, didn't say much and just told him to leave. Seeing this, Hector's lackeys surrounded the two of them and tried to drive Blake away, but just as they did, the two were right in front of their eyes. Blake was now seething with rage, and as soon as he saw an opening, he struck out with powerful blows, knocking several people to the ground. He then broke free from Hector, who had come to restrain him, and escaped with Ellie. However, guards swarmed in from all directions and blocked their way. Working together, they quickly subdued Blake. A familiar figure slowly approached. It was Mason, the chief of security from before. Ever since Blake and his companion caused chaos at the exam last time, Mason had been assigned to this sunless underground place, frustrated with nowhere to vent his anger. Now, spotting the very culprit responsible for his downfall, he didn't hesitate, ruthlessly snapped Blake's left leg. In an instant, Blake's agonized screams echoed throughout the vast factory, while Luna's furious roar also rang out from within the machinery workshop. Staring at Cole and the others before her, she couldn't help but voice her accusations. These past few months, she had been acting as an accomplice, going against her conscience to whitewash Old D's reputation. Now, his approval ratings were soaring, while the resistance organisation had made no move at all. but Cole simply told her that they were waiting for an opportunity, had already discovered that all the evidence was stored on Georgina's computer, Old D's supporter. All Luna needed to do was copy it. Once it was handed over to Jack, it could be used as evidence to bring down Old D. At the same time, they would also send Connie and the others abroad, so Luna would have nothing to worry about. Hearing that the plan was finally making progress, Luna gladly agreed, only asking that Connie be well taken care of. In order to get close to Georgina, she used her outstanding debating skills to join Old D's team, preparing to act on the day of the election. Taking advantage of the chaos, she sneaked into Georgina's office to steal documents. Meanwhile, completely unaware of what was happening, Blake arrived outside the factory's iron cage on crutches, frowning at the bloody brawl inside. Blake met Hector's fierce gaze from within the cage, not realizing that Hector's revenge was about to come. That night, Hector brought his men to Blake's dormitory and stuffed a towel into the sleeping Blake's mouth. Listening to his anguished screams, the group called out Blake's name, kicked his legs hard several times, and swaggered off, leaving behind only Blake, whose tears streamed down his face as he buried his pain deep inside. In the infirmary, watching unwilling workers being brought in to inhale toxic gas, he had long since seen through the factory's lies. Months of mechanical labour had left him thoroughly disgusted, and the only way out of the factory was as a cold corpse. There was no such thing as returning to society here. Only the workers who numbly toiled on just to survive remained. He understood that only by changing the current situation could he truly return to society. In the early hours of the morning, a loud, frantic knocking sounded at the door. Seeing Karen, dead drunk, standing there, Luna was exasperated. Karen babbled incoherently as she squeezed into the room, searching for something, rummaging around, and even turned on the stereo without caring that Connie was sleeping. The blaring noise filled the entire room. Just as Luna was about to step forward to stop her, Karen suddenly turned around. There was not a trace of drunkenness in her eyes as she stared at Luna and showed her the cardboard in her hand. It turned out that Karen, inspired by Blake's disappearance, had made a series of connections. She discovered that Global Capital, the company behind Old D, was actually increasing production capacity even as it kept cutting staff, and was even capable of taking on subcontracted work. On top of that, the other company had left a large amount of unused space at the factory. He exclaimed in shock, certain that the laid-off workers hadn't died at all, but were instead being used as free labour for Global Capital. But when he tried to make this public, his boss refused, saying there was no concrete evidence. Dejected, Helen could only leave. Just as he got into the car, a bag was suddenly pulled tightly over his head from behind. Fortunately, Karen managed to attract the attention of some passers-by by calling the police, which allowed her to escape with her life. However, this only made Karen realise that there must be something fishy going on behind Global Capital and Old D, so she rushed overnight to seek help from Luna. Seeing that Karen was being hunted, Luna handed her the business card left by the agent, hoping she could get protection. With election day approaching, Old D's approval ratings remained high with Luna's help, and he had even secured several weeks' worth of votes in a row. And today was also the day Luna would put her plan into action. In the elevator, Jack could only wish her good luck, and, overcome with emotion, Luna gave him a quick kiss before they soon reached their floor and immediately split up to carry out their tasks. Seeing the bustling voting scene, Luna used the excuse of going to the restroom to slip away toward Georgina's office. But now, with tight security around Old D, even going to the restroom required a guard to accompany her. But opportunities like this were rare, so Luna didn't hesitate. She opened the bathroom window and climbed out. Looking down at the busy traffic below, she knew that a single misstep would mean a fatal fall. Carefully pressing her back against the wall, she inched along slowly, waiting for the right moment before making a sudden leap. However, she nearly slipped, ending up with only her hands gripping the edge of the wall. While Luna was in danger in the underground factory, Blake was also preparing for a life or death struggle with Hector. He asked his companion to deliver the message about the jewel to Ellie, but Hector had already bribed the messenger. Ellie only heard that Blake had given up on her, and in utter despair, she decided to rely on herself to escape. She pretended to be seriously ill to lure the guard over, and just as he was checking on her, Ellie bit down hard on the guard's finger. However, the guard was well trained and forced her to let go with a single punch. Then they tied her tightly to the wall again. Several guards rushed in and carried the subdued Ellie to the infirmary. Meanwhile, completely unaware of this, Blake was standing in the cage with a crutch, taunting Hector. Seeing the arrogant Hector, Blake suddenly threw aside his crutch and, amid the crowd's cheers, got into a fighting stance. The two of them fought like wild beasts, hurting each other inside the iron cage. Hector, relying on his physical strength, launched a frenzied attack on Blake. Although Blake was injured, he had much more fighting experience. He quickly seized an opportunity, leapt up, and landed a heavy punch, knocking Hector to the ground. Seeing Hector, who was no longer as arrogant as before and now lying defeated, even though he had once hurt Ellie, but Blake still reached out his hand to him. Unexpectedly, Hector played dirty. He twisted Blake's arm, reversed their positions, and pinned Blake Blake beneath him, kicking repeatedly at Blake's injured leg. However, he didn't notice that Blake's hand had already reached for his cane. Summoning all his strength, Blake swung it back, finally knocking Hector to the ground, unable to get up again. Just as Blake claimed victory, the alarm sounded. Blake was frantic when he learned that Ellie had been captured, but she didn't act rashly. Instead, she revealed the truth behind the factory to Hector and the others. The so-called promise of proving their worth and returning to society was nothing but a lie fabricated by Global Corp merely to make them work themselves to the bone without complaint. Now, the only thing they could do was to create a large-scale disturbance in the factory to draw away all the guards, allowing themselves to escape amid the chaos and expose what was happening here to the public. After explaining the plan, Blake steeled herself and deliberately cut her own right hand. Supported by her companions, she headed toward the infirmary. But as they reached the door, they heard Ellie's anguished cries. Blake burst in, knocked the doctor down, and in order to escape, pulled out a scalpel and stabbed Borg, removing the potentiometer. Taking advantage of Ecto stirring up chaos, they changed into the doctor's clothes and ran out with Ellie. Meanwhile, Luna, hanging by the edge of the building, was in a state of nerve-wracking suspense. Finding support on both sides, she finally climbed up to the balcony using both her hands and feet, successfully entering Georgina's office. She inserted the hard drive and saw the underground facility, just as she and Karen had suspected. She could even clearly see Blake's figure on the surveillance footage. Luna was shocked to see her beloved, but no one knew when Georgina would return, so she could only hurry to transfer the evidence. Meanwhile, the security outside the restroom noticed the prolonged silence and quickly reported it. Georgina received the message and immediately rushed back to her office to ensure the security of the intel. But just as she was about to push the door open, Jack appeared in time, claiming that oldie urgently needed to see her. However, seeing that Georgina still wanted to enter and check, he had no choice but to repeat his excuse in desperation. The situation was extremely urgent. Georgina believed him and hurried off to look for Old D, but when the two met, Jack's lie was immediately exposed. Old D promptly notified security to arrest Jack. Meanwhile, under Jack's selfless cover, Luna finally finished gathering all the evidence. Just as security was about to break in, she slipped out of the restroom only to run straight into Georgina. This made her extremely nervous. It turned out that the dust on her clothes had caught Georgina's attention, and Luna, not knowing how to explain, was filled with anxiety. But seeing the suspicion in Georgina's eyes, she suddenly had a flash of inspiration and blurted out, "It's not laundry day yet." Unexpectedly, Georgina, who came from a wealthy background, didn't doubt the quick-witted Luna at all. Luna managed to escape by sheer luck and immediately contacted Cole. But at this moment, things were not going smoothly for the others either. Cole and his companion were escaping through a deep, winding tunnel with Connie, but their guide had already betrayed them. After shooting and killing one of their companions, the guide abducted Joey. Fortunately, Joey didn't panic but the guide's hand hard, causing him to cry out in pain and let go. Cole quickly grabbed a wooden stick nearby and seized the opportunity to subdue the traitor. Naoto continued to flee along the tunnel, while the isolated and helpless Luna could only pin her hopes on the agent from before. After contacting him, the two agreed to meet on the rooftop. To be cautious, the agent destroyed all of Luna's communication devices and then asked whether Connie and the others were safe. With evidence in hand, Luna had no doubts and truthfully shared all the information she had. The agent was astonished to learn that Connie had actually managed to escape the country, but with that being the case, Luna was now the only one left to deal with. After confirming that she had no means of communication, he drew his gun and forced Luna to walk toward the edge of the building. It turned out that he had been working for Old Die all along, and now that Luna had finally come to him, he was ready to act. But just then, the sound of a ringing phone broke the tense atmosphere. Luna seized the opportunity to shove him to the ground, and the two began to struggle. Knowing she was no match for him, Luna quickly ran toward the door, but with a loud bang, a bullet struck the door frame. It was a clear warning that this way was blocked. In this life or death moment, Luna noticed that the distance between here and the floor below wasn't too great, but with the agent right behind her, she had no time to hesitate. Luna leapt down toward the lower floor. Fortunately, her calculation was correct. She crashed through the roof and landed inside someone's home. Luckily, the evidence was still in Luna's hands, and she didn't dare waste a second. At this point, the only person she could trust was Karen, so she hurriedly brought the hard drive to Karen's house. Karen was stunned by the evidence Luna had brought. Now, she could finally prove that there was indeed a hidden agenda behind the downsizing plan. She copied the files from the hard drive, had Luna, who was being hunted, stay at her home, and set off to the company herself to make the evidence public. However, the trauma from the last attack still haunted her, so before getting into the car, Karen carefully checked the back seat. Only after repeatedly steadying her breathing did she start the vehicle. A loud noise drew Luna's attention. Seeing the flames erupt, she couldn't believe that Karen had died just like that. It wasn't until a team of agents emerged from both sides that she remembered she had once given Karen her business card number, imagining that this would indirectly lead to her friend's death. Watching the agents about to head upstairs, the grief-stricken Luna decided to take revenge on them. She turned on the gas, tied the switch with a wire, grabbed a small self-defense weapon, and left through the back door. A loud explosion sounded behind her, but Luna didn't stop to check on the enemy's condition, she just kept running. However, as soon as she got down the stairs, she was ambushed by the agents from before. Jinlan swung her baton several times, and Luna fell to the ground in response. Listening to her opponent's constant threats, Luna didn't panic. Instead, she seized the right moment and stabbed the agent in the thigh. The detective lost her balance, and Luna pushed her down the stairs. She grabbed the hidden hard drive and ran toward the media company. All the reporters at the media company were busy covering the new president's campaign. But when Luna, her face covered in blood, burst through the door, the receptionist didn't ask questions and immediately called Karen's supervisor. The two of them looked at this invaluable piece of evidence together. Realizing its significance at a glance, the supervisor quickly called for a helicopter to head to the location recorded on the drive. Meanwhile, taking advantage of the chaos, Blake and his companion disguised themselves as doctors to make their escape. They weaved through the chaotic security guards. When Blake spotted the room with the drainage pipe, he knew this was their chance for freedom. The two of them leapt down and followed the passage outward, but at that moment, Mason also discovered their trail and began to pursue them closely from behind. As Blake climbed out and gazed at the long-lost world of freedom, both of them couldn't help but weep with joy. But before they could even discuss how to escape the desert, Mason swung his baton twice from behind, subduing the two of them. Looking at the fallen Blake, Mason finally had a reason to kill him. Just then, accompanied by a deafening roar, every move on the desert was broadcast live, and Ellie seized the moment when Mason was momentarily blinded, raising a stone and smashing it down on him. When the dust settled, she looked at the surviving Blake before her. Luna was overjoyed, and after the two embraced passionately, she was so moved that she kissed him. But just then, another pair of guards appeared. This time, everyone became the target and was taken away. It turned out that after Old D became president, he labelled everyone who opposed the downsizing plan as criminals, monitoring everyone through their phones and tablets. As the group was being detained and transferred, a violent impact suddenly struck. When the car door opened, it was Jack who appeared before them, and the final showdown was about to begin. The film ends here.